I'm Dylan.
Hi, I'm Neil. And what?
Hi, I'm Gina.
And this is Youth on Subjects of the World. So today we have a guest, and that's Gina Riley. So would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Gina Riley. I am clinical professor of special education, adolescent special education at Keeney Hunter College. I do research on self-determination, intrinsic motivation, homeschooling, unschooling, and Sudbury schooling. And I am also a mother of a grown unschooler. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right,
I loved meeting you guys at Arrow. It was so cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I really like your talk.
Thanks. I'm so happy to like talk to you again and like complete the conversation.
Yeah.
No, you were really looking forward to it. It was really nice that this opportunity popped up.
Yeah, I was so super psyched.
All right. Well, I know I have a couple questions. I wrote a couple down so I wouldn't be lost.
There you go.
So I want to know, like, what got you inspired to start like conducting studies on unschooling?
Yeah, so partially it was parent curiosity. So when my son was born, I knew I couldn't send him to school. He was just a different kid, and he knew, like, I just didn't want to squash the curiosity that he was and who he was as like a 4-year-old. So I was doing my master's at the time and got really into this theory of intrinsic motivation, which is like Edward Dietschy and Richard Ryan's theory from the University of Rochester. And intrinsic motivation is all about like doing what you love and like living a life full of passion and interest. So I started like, the minute I heard about that theory, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that life for myself, but I also want that life for my son. And he was the type of kid that wanted that life too. I think like 4 and 5-year-olds are just intrinsically curious and like intrinsically motivated. So I did more research on homeschooling and unschooling because I thought, this is like interesting. I didn't ever know anyone who homeschooled. I was public schooled myself. Started doing research, started getting more into theories of intrinsic motivation and self-determination, and thought, yeah, like this is like the secret to all of life. So studied it more and more, and this got me more into and involved in doing some qualitative ethnographic research on homeschooling. And so I went into like homeschooling groups and I asked them questions about intrinsic motivation in homeschooling. And it was a neat thing. So that was like my master's thesis. My master's thesis was an ethnographic study on intrinsic motivation in homeschoolers. Did my doctoral dissertation. By then my son was unschooled like throughout, by then he was 12 and still unschooling. Did my doctoral dissertation on differing levels of competence, autonomy, and relatedness between homeschoolers and traditionally schooled students. So that was super interesting. And then right after I did my doctoral dissertation, got partnered with Dr. Peter Gray through a series of just emails. And oh my gosh, I do the same research as you. And like, look how cool that was without even knowing who he was. Again, it's the power of an email. And really started studying unschoolers. So Peter Gray and I did a large-scale study of unschoolers with over 200 families. And then we looked at that study and thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be cool to do a study on like unschooler outcomes? Because everyone wants to know like, yeah, this sounds great, but what happens when they grow up? So we did 2 studies on unschooling outcomes, one focusing on like life after unschooling and college and higher education, and the other one focusing on like employment and financial independence and things like that. And now, I've done studies on world schooling and unschooling, and that's really my love. And now Dr. Gray and I are partnering with Lisa Puga from Princeton on a study of Hudson Valley Sudbury schoolers. So we're super excited about that. That isn't even started yet. We're looking for grant funding and things like that, but super, super psyched about that. And it just sort of branches off from there.
That's really awesome. Like when you first found out about unschooling for your child, were you skeptical all about it? And if you were, like what got you around skepticism? Because I know lots of hours spent in YouTube comment sections about unschooling. It seems a lot of people who are like oh, this is just parenting gone awry and there's ruining.
Well, a lot of
So,
people, I think there's a lot of ignorance displayed, especially when it comes to unschooling. Like, I know just something that Dylan and I, something that became a kind of, for the, I guess who don't know, when Dylan and I go to a Sudbury school, and something that became kind of a big deal in our Sudbury schools, we were watching this reporter from, was it ABC News, Juju Chang, and she interviewed she's kind of like, I guess, a big deal in the unschooling world. Who was it again? Dylan, do you know who?
I forget her name.
It was Dana Martin.
Oh, it's Danya Martin. Okay.
Donna,
Yeah.
is it pronounced Donna?
I think it's Danya. I've never met her, but it's
Well,
Danya.
her.
Yeah.
She was Juju Chang was interviewing her, and it came across, and everyone in the school felt this way, as really kind of, I guess, manipulated. Like, they would say things like, when I asked this child a multiplication question, he stumbled. They didn't even show that them asking the question. Secondly, if he answered it, it's kind of irrelevant. And even if it is, I mean, it's not like we have a calculator in our pocket 24/7. And the point isn't even that. The point is the way it's edited. I don't know, it just felt kind of off. But the part that didn't really get to me. The part was the comments and people saying it was like comparable to child abuse. So we were saying that. And it's like, I mean, I can see where they're coming from because it's a place of ignorance, and everyone comes from a place of ignorance at first. But it's just, like things, there's people saying like, oh, it's child abuse because you're not teaching them anything. And it's ridiculous because, I mean, it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost, if you say that kids don't want to learn or they won't learn, I mean, how do you think you came up with schools in the first place? I mean, somebody came up with that idea. They developed the knowledge. I mean, that wouldn't have happened in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that we should just go back to the way, obviously things improve over time, right? So you can make the argument that, well, things improve, therefore this, and this. That's just the starting argument. That's not the whole thing, because you can't just be in a nature fallacy. That can't be my entire argument there. I'm just saying that to say that the only way humans learn is when they're sat down and just told, I mean, it's not the way it works. I mean,
interestingly, right, this is, I guess, the cool thing about like having, so my son is 22 now, right? And so when I started researching as an academic homeschooling, unschooling, and when I started like unschooling my own kid, there wasn't like internet wasn't really a thing, right? Like we used to go on internet to like blog, and that's about it. Like Facebook wasn't popular, like YouTube wasn't popular, and so yeah, I had really limited access to like internet because it just wasn't a thing. So we didn't have the comment section on blogs or YouTubes. However, we did have the comment section with regards to people. And, I grew up, like my mother was a public school guidance counselor. My dad, had gone to college and totally didn't know anything but public education. And so neighbor, family, friend comments were brutal, like completely brutal. Like I have an email still from my sister-in-law asking if my son could read. And he was like 11 years old at the time. And I'm thinking, why would you think that he wouldn't be able to read? We used to have neighbors like knocking on our door, no joke, coming over. And I remember this one neighbor, like my son was like 4. She knew we weren't going to send him, or I wasn't going to send him to school. She wore like a sweater with all these colors. And she literally, like, we opened the door and we're like, hey, Mrs. G. And she's like, Benjamin, what color is this? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is this the life we're going to lead, right? Like, yeah. So like asking, math questions and stuff, we literally got, what color is this? So yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I'm super glad that I didn't unschool my son in like the age of social media, except at the end. And number 2, the way unschooling has been portrayed on TV, right, has its pros and cons. So number 1, the con is that you get stuff like TV that kind of slants things, right? There was a wife swap episode, and I don't know who was in that wife swap episode.
Dana Martin was actually.
Was it her?
Yeah, I watched that.
It was her. So I didn't know about this until the person that I was consulting said like, well, unschooling's like that, right? And I'm thinking, no, unschooling is not like wife swap. What are you talking about, right? So like you get this skewed view from the media.
Yeah, I know. I would feel very confused. I was binge watching this show called Shameless.
Yeah.
And in that, there's this girl who's like a teen mom, and she's like trying to get out of school by saying like, oh, I can start unschooling.
Yeah, I could start. Yeah.
And it was like, it was very dumb, and it's a very bad misinterpretation of what unschooling actually is.
Yeah. So you've got that so you've got that con side where it's just like this very skewed view. The pro side, interestingly, so I've had homeschool parents tell me that they started homeschooling because of wife swap, or that they started homeschooling because of what, like, they didn't even know it existed, but they saw it on TV. So good or bad, right? It's like an opening.
Yeah.
And I always think everything is just an opening. But yeah, it's very, very skewed. Every time I'm interviewed, whether it's for like TV or media or newspaper, like things like child abuse come up. And I don't even understand why that's part of the equation, like why that's a question at all. People don't ask public schoolers whether, child abuse is rampant in the public. Like, it's not a question that's asked by individuals.
Yeah, something that really gets me, I think the most is that now, obviously, so I always present this question. I say, the thing I get asked so many questions, and way more than a public school kid would ever get asked about public school.
Yeah.
And I get asked so many questions, constantly berated with them. But the one question that never comes up is, well, are the kids happy?
Mm-hmm.
That never comes up. Now I got this one person retorted by saying, well, I mean, it's kind of short term when you think about it, because if my kids aren't happy, well, I guess that's not good, and I want them to be successful in the long term. I say, okay, stop and think for a second. You're talking about 17 years, probably most likely like 18 or 19 years of that kid's life. And if you're just going to torture them and mold them into this perfect being, and after all that, you would think that they'd be this, like, after all that, they'd be this god, but no, they're the average Joe. No, that's not worth it, in my opinion, 17 years of your life. Most likely, again, 18 or 19, because at 17, on people's 18th birthday, they don't just move out or something like that. It's not how it works. So, I mean, this is a very conservative estimate, 17 years of just, so, I mean, you can't discount the child's happiness. Now, yes, it has to be, we also have to take into account to, if they are going to be successful, but that's not the biggest, I mean, it is a big, but that's not the sole problem. You also have to take into account how happy they're going to be, because believe it or not, happiness is kind of important. It's, the one reason people like to, exist. I mean, why do we have a job in the first place? What is the whole point of being successful? So we can sustain a certain point of contentment and then try to pursue happiness. I mean, that's all it is. And if you're taking 17 years off of that, that's a big price to pay.
Yeah. And so interestingly, like, you guys know from Arrow, right? So I have like one foot in like the homeschooling, unschooling research world. And then I have like the other foot in the realm of public education, because I also educate public school teachers. I run teacher education programs. So it's interesting. And I honestly love both sides, and I can see both sides, right? And I have to be able to do that in order to do my work. It's a weird quandary, but I have to be able to do that. I will say that I ask teachers all the time, like one of our first things that I ask is, what is the purpose of school, right? So my teachers come up with all sorts of answers, and very interesting answers. Like, some say the purpose of school is to become a good citizen, and others say the purpose of school is to be educated, whatever that means. What I never get is like anything about happiness or well-being, or like the purpose of school is to create self-determined individuals. Like, I don't get those types of answers. So I always think that's interesting, because I always think, like, we talk about like happiness because it's important, right? Like, happiness and well-being is the most important thing. But yeah, it's not a priority, or at least it's not a priority yet when it comes to public schooling. And you do see it a lot in the alternative education realm, which I think is wonderful. I will say that public schools talk a lot about social emotional learning, but they're not there yet. Like, see where you guys are, like it's all about like being a healthy, happy, well-adjusted person. Like, they're not there yet. I think they're inching.
I'd be curious, Gina, I don't know if you did any studies on this, but do you know what the level of like depression in unschoolers is?
Yeah, so we did not ask in any of our studies about mental health and unschooling. Interestingly, it's on my list. I kind of am doing like this developmental research list, right? Where so now I'm studying like unschooling and parenting. And then I plan to go and look at unschooling and mental health. We've toyed around with a couple of hypotheses regarding that. But yeah, that's an interesting study.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that because like I don't know what that. I would assume it would be lower than public schoolers, but I'm not all that sure because it seems like a lot of people that are unschooling is like tend to be the outcasts
Yeah.
and are prone to depression.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'm doing a talk about unschooling and learning disabilities. And I think it's an interesting, I'm actually having a conversation right after this program with a parent who runs a Sudbury type school, and she wants to know about learning disabilities in Sudbury. So I don't know if I put learning disabilities and emotional or mental health in the same realm, but yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and I don't know the answer to that. And again, like I'm coming from two worlds, right? Which I think is good because I have this like neutral thing going on. I'm like the researcher, I try to come into research with not knowing anything, and then I find out. But I would be curious too. I'd be super curious. It's on my list, just not now.
Well, I know like my dad had this was like a couple of years ago. I don't even think I found Sudbury yet, but I'd left public school, and when I'd been in public school, I had really severe anxiety. And my dad was talking to one of his friends that has a daughter in public school, and she was the woman was genuinely surprised that I was not on any kind of antidepressant.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this was like right after I left, the school district wanted me to go to a psychiatrist so he could like evaluate me for like an evaluation. And like my parents are very into like homeopathic remedies and alternative to like regular medicine. Like I've only ever had antibiotics once.
Yeah.
For Lyme's disease. And I remember my parents didn't even let me read the letter, which is like rare. I was like, well, now I really want to know what it says.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Then I snuck and I read it, but it was like, you can have your, like, it's fine if you want to do this whole stuff, but your child needs severe antidepressants. What are you talking? Like I wasn't even, at that time after I left, I wasn't even depressed. Like I felt fine because I was so happy I was just out. And I was like, I'm really surprised at the rampant use of like antidepressants. And I know even some of my friends that are at Sudbury, they have friends who are on like antidepressants. And my friends in public schools say they know a lot of people who are on antidepressants. And it's really surprising, like the rampant use of them. I don't think people understand that. Like we had a visitor from Switzerland come visit our school, and I was talking about like how like we know a lot of people who are on antidepressants. You really couldn't believe it. And I remember I was also watching this mini documentary, and it was a short piece about a teacher, and I don't know, he did something nice. I'm not too sure, but he was like normally the mean teacher who everyone hated, and he was going on and on about how school isn't supposed to be fun. I was like, wow, you're like an idiot.
So interestingly, right? I have this discussion all the time, not really about depression or anxiety, but about ADHD with my teachers. And I'll stand by this, right? Like educators aren't doctors. And no one in that sort of capacity should be making decisions about medication.
Absolutely.
Like it's just not within your role, right? As a teacher, to make any determination, or as a school administrator, to make any determination about medicine or suggestion about medicine or medication. That is a conversation between the individual and the individual's doctor.
To be honest, I mean, people are talking about abuse. Are you kidding me? You're talking about prescribing drugs to a child, and it's ridiculous. And the fact that the people want to get on these, like, a lot of times it is a power play, and they want to, like they're this they want to be this people want to be this overarching authority. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to generalize everyone. I'm just saying that this happens, and it's ridiculous because, I mean, you're talking about the parents overstepping their bounds into education. I mean, you're overstepping your bounds into the medical industry, which is such a complex industry. The amount of training that doctors have to go through, and they even sometimes corners, even cutting things like nutrition for training with doctors. And and you think you're qualified? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I'll never, in the realm I'm in, I'll never make a real statement about medication or, again, I think it's a personal decision between the person and the person's doctor, right? That's
Exactly.
period. It's
There's nothing else. No,
not a conversation
no
about,
ifs, ands, or buts about it.
yeah,
That's how it is.
that's it.
And the other thing is the fact that when it comes to things like Adderall, you see, it's really, honestly, it's kind of disgusting, but it's almost inconvenient for the teacher, and it's really disgusting. See, because I mean, if there's a kid who's the really eccentric person in the class and can't sit, and oh God forbid, can't sit down for like 5 hours.
Yeah, I know. I was watching this thing and it was hilarious. It was a South Park episode. And I don't watch a lot of South Park, but I just was clicking through the channels and I saw this, and it was a really hilarious commentary on like people giving on Adderall and ADHD, and it was like about how it was like these kids who saw this other kid who had ADHD and he didn't have to do homework, and they're like, how can we get that? And they're like, well, none of you guys have ADHD. And they're like, oh, okay. And then like, but we do. And so they go to the doctor's office. It's like, let's test if these kids have ADHD. And it's like, all right, now everyone sit down and I'm going to read you this 1,200-page book, and you have to sit through the entire thing. And by the end, they're all like just sleeping and like, oh my God, this is an epidemic.
I think Peter Gray writes a lot about this topic. I always think it's so interesting. And I won't ever come from a place where I talk about, like, I teach classes on neurobiology of like learning disabilities and ADHD. So I'm never going to come to a place where I'm going to say that this doesn't exist. Is there like overdiagnosis, misdiagnosis, overclassification? Absolutely. Is it a school-wide problem? Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, schools over-identify. And that's something, and interestingly, they know that they do. So it's not like this is new news to the public schools.
They know so how do you know that they have over-identify? I mean,
they know that they've over-identified because there's been discussions between psychologists and teachers and administrators regarding the percentage of individuals with ADHD or the percentage of individuals with learning disabilities is a small percentage, probably less than 10% of the school-wide population. So if you go and you measure a classroom and you have like 30% of your males in that classroom diagnosed with ADHD, that's an issue, right? So they do those stats and they like compare those stats, and that's how you know. So, I mean, schools do know, and like every textbook will talk about over-identification, over-classification, misdiagnosis. And I will say, like, overall, they're trying to do a better job. My new teachers definitely know about that, right? Like my new teachers are warned from their very first day in teacher education. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll never come to a place that say these things don't exist, but I will always come to a place that say they are always overclassified, over-identified.
Yeah, I know for sure. I've met a couple people that just totally deny ADHD.
Yeah, I can't get on that. I can't get on that train.
I've absolutely met unschooled people who've been unschooled their entire life who absolutely have ADHD and have been clinically diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
And it's not like, it's not a surprise at all. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but
no.
It's like, it's not an overdiagnosed.
Yeah. You have a small percentage, and I'm never going to get on the train that say that these things don't exist. And I have to come from that. I know, like, I've read Greenberg's work and I've read a bunch of works that talk about it. And I think they're very interesting. And I try to like look at that side too. But yeah, I think everyone is concerned about overclassification, overdiagnosis, misdiagnosis, but we still see it. And it is something I know public schools are working on, but it is interesting to talk about in this context too, right? I always wonder if people choose to send their kids or choose to homeschool their kids or choose to unschool their kids or choose to send kids to free schools because maybe they've gotten like a misdiagnosis or something. I always wonder about that. So that's just something I wonder about and something I'll ask about in future studies.
Okay.
I do have another question. Do you think unschooling is fit for every family and every child?
Yeah, no, I'll never be on that train either.
Yeah, I agree.
ever. So I think that unschooling is always a choice, just like everything is a choice, right? And I think that if you choose to unschool your child, more power to you, and all the best wishes in the world. But it's always a choice, and you wouldn't want every parent unschooling their kid. Just
There's a
like
lot of stupid parents.
Right. And just like you wouldn't want, I think you could say this about Sudbury. You tell me. Just like you wouldn't want every kid in a Sudbury school.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had trouble with this before, and we've had dilemmas with, kids that were like, well, Sudbury, we're like, oh, well, we feel like Sudbury should be the place for everyone. And we were corrected very fast. We realized that some kids are just not good fits, kids with problems with violence and threats. And we just like, well, we can't deal with that. Because in the end, I think it's a very good way to explain it is Sudbury School and unschooling, they're both schooling. And here's the thing. So they're both schooling, and you wouldn't be able to accept someone with extreme violent tendencies in a public school. So why can we do that? Or in a Sudbury school, someone with extreme violent tendencies. Now, I'm not saying, I think they would actually do better in a Sudbury environment, and they have. But if they can't overcome that, we can't harm the community by having someone violent there just for their benefit, because that's
I know this has been like an argument with a lot of people I've had on unschooling, or not unschooling, for Sudbury schools is, should every child be allowed to come in? Like, should we be able to kick someone out for being violent? And like a lot of people say that that like you should always let someone in. And I feel like our school, even though it's open to the public, we're still like a community, and we can't, like, we have to have some kind of boundaries for who we let in, and who we let in, because we want to be able to control the environment that we're having, and the community that we have. And I think it would disrupt it if we were forced to keep people at our school.
So there's a difference, right? So that gets really interesting, because in public schools you have you have Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and then under that act, right, and that came into play in 1975 and then 1990, and then there was a reauthorization in 2004, whatever. But then under that act is this whole concept of free, appropriate public education. So you do have to, in public schools, you do have to accept everyone and put them in appropriate or least restrictive environment type classes. And I think Sudbury is interesting because, I mean, the question is, do you want that in Sudbury? Would it be free, appropriate private education? Would that be a thing? So that's a really good question, right? And really interesting. Yeah, there's definite parallels. And I'll always talk about parallels between public schools and homeschooling and unschooling in Sudbury, just because it's what I know.
Well, I mean, I guess I feel like when it comes to that, I mean, public schools, they they have to accept everyone at first, but people do get expelled. And I mean, I think we do give everyone a chance. Everyone gets, a visiting week, and then school meeting has to approve them. But after, I mean, it's a week basically to keep, I mean, if they're extremely violent and hitting people, we're going to kick them out before that week even ends. But I think that happened in public school too, if they were being extremely violent. Now, and we've given a lot of leeway to some kids that we just want to see help them grow, but then it just doesn't work, and we're sorry, we just can't do this anymore. And I mean, that's just how it has to be, unfortunately.
No, and I mean, that's the beauty and the right of a private school, right? So public education, even if they kick them out of school and they get expelled, they have to send them somewhere, right? Because it's under federal law. But the beauty of a Sudbury and the beauty of all these different private schools is you can say, this is not the right, as I like you guys call it a community. And this is not the right fit for our community. And you can say that, and that's completely and 100% fine, and wonderful. And a really interesting model. I'm obsessed with the Sudbury model right now. I'm reading a lot about it, and I'm researching a lot about it. And
I know that's how I felt when I first found out about it.
Yeah.
I was upset at myself that I hadn't found it before.
Yeah.
A lot of
it wouldn't have even been an option. The school, when I found it, it was just opening up that year, and I was still upset at myself.
Yeah. I'm
I
like,
I know for a lot of parents, there's like a moment where it just clicks for them, where it makes sense. Like a while, it's like this is just a waste of my time, and I'm sitting my daughter here for no reason. And I know it happened with my dad and a couple people at our like a couple parents at our school that there's a moment where they're like, oh, this is like really genius. This is like next level. And I
yeah,
totally get that.
I'm kind of
It's a
obsessed.
genius idea.
I have gotten the Sudbury School Starter workbook and everything, and I'm like going through it. So I'm kind of obsessed with it. Yeah, the clicking thing, I love it. And Neil said it when he was like, like Sudbury and other schools, like the fact that there is concern for happiness and well-being.
Yeah.
There is concern for like personal like wellness. I mean, that's next level, right? That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I mean, I think that what a lot of people try to, I guess they tend to, what's what I'm, so I think a lot of concerns that come, I'm not trying to say that Sudbury schooling is superior. I'm just saying that something that a lot of people concerns they get about unschooling and homeschooling is the social aspect. I'm not saying that and I think that a lot of that concern is not very well founded because when I was unschooled for a very long time and I didn't have much of a problem.
Yeah.
But however, with that concern, I did get bored being unschooled because I just stayed at home and I was like, well, I mean, I can do all these activities, but there's something missing. Sudbury School, I feel like it was just so great because, I mean, you need to learn how to, speak to people at a Sudbury School. If you want to get anything done, you have to talk. And if you're trying to pass a controversial motion in the school meeting, you're going to have to gain support. You're going to have to talk to people and try to gain the support, or you're going to have to go into school meeting and convince everyone, or at least the majority, that this is a good idea. We should do this for whatever reason. And you're going to have to, make that happen. So I just feel that it's such a powerful concept to allow children, the children are the lawmakers in Sudbury School. I was talking to Dylan, we need to flesh out our graduation process this year. And I was talking to Dylan on the phone and I was saying, well, I mean, in the fact that I guess I'm going to go to school meeting and we're going to be talking about how to flesh out our graduation process and how we can approve students to get a diploma from our school is pretty interesting. And you think that, oh, kids are just going to be like, oh, here you get a diploma because you went to the school. I'm going to pass a vote that says everyone gets a diploma. No, absolutely not, because then it's worthless. If you were going to give a diploma to everyone, you might as well just not have one. So, and we understand that. And there's not going to be any, I mean, we don't have a rule that says, oh, on every Friday we'll spend all the school money to buy candy. I mean, otherwise we lose all our money. And we understand that because we actually have to manage everything. Something that I'd like to bring out a lot is that, is that the fact that when people don't seem to, I guess, understand, how, I guess, people learn. And I know people say, oh, well, you're learning all the time. But like, well, how do you, what career path do you take? So I think that what I really like about Sudbury is that it really just gives you the time to actually explore it. I mean, honestly, you're just sitting there, and public school, you're just sitting down there doing this, like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Okay. Most people go to college and haven't even decided what they're going to do. That is not the time to decide. I'm sorry, but I feel like that's not the time to decide. You should have already decided. That is a very big, that is your entire life. And I feel like you're right by now.
Like $35,000+ a year to think about what you might want to do.
Yeah, just decide first. That's so, I mean, and it really just gives you the time to pursue those things and figure out what you like and what you don't like. And that's really, and people seem to think that, well, they're just not going to do it. They're just going to sit around and play video games all day. And we have kids that just sit around and play video games all day. But that doesn't mean that they're not. And that doesn't mean that there's going to reach a certain point where they're going to be like, well, we want to,
And that's also assuming that they're not learning anything while playing a video game.
Right. Yeah. And that's also, and the thing is if I think that they have enough critical thinking skills to understand that if I want to keep playing video games, I'm going to need to put food on my table and buy those video games and put them into a console that I buy and buy a TV to play them.
And I think if they didn't even have those critical thinking skills in a public,
you're going to have a much bigger problem in public school than Sudbury School.
So here's the beauty, right? I actually think you mentioned like 3 different things, which is so amazing. And I just want to talk about 2, and then you guys tell me if I'm talking too much. The
We don't
social.
have that problem, believe me.
Oh,
We all talk too much.
good. Well, just shut me up if I do.
I think no one else is here.
There you go.
Yeah, thank God someone else. Yeah.
It's so fun with you guys. It's like the best interview I've ever done. You could
This is the 3 people that talk too much, so
I love it.
totally
I
fine.
love it. It's literally like the best hosts I have ever had in my whole career. So just know that. You spoke about like the social thing, so that's always an interesting, right? That's a real good conversation piece. I think what you see both in unschooling. See, what people don't understand is like people think like people have to be in a room with same age, same grade kids to be social, right? And that's just not how it works.
That's not how it works in the real world.
Not really how it works in the real world.
After that, before you go, so it was really funny when we first started going. I don't even really know how we're related. I think they're like my dad's cousins. Like I don't know, some long down the line. But I was telling him about how my brother Andrew, who at the time was 8, and our friend Julian, who at the time was 16, were like pretty good friends and hung out a lot and played a lot of video games online.
I always bring up that.
And yeah, we're genuinely friends. And they were like, and I thought that was so interesting because Andrew can learn so much from him. And they're like, isn't Andrew going to make Julian a lot dumber?
Like, you're like insane, right? Like, this is crazy talk. Yes.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking? Yeah. So, and it's so funny. Like,
Did someone say that? What? Is Andrew going to make you? Who said that?
Or like, I don't know, one of my family members. I don't really know who they are.
That's not how it works. I mean, yeah,
it's just so dumb on so many levels.
Well, I don't think people think about like, so a lot of people like, and I hate to use the word mainstream, right? But if you live,
right.
I hate that word, but I'm going to use it.
I hate that word,
right? All right. So if you live in this world where you send your child to school, you are thinking like, so like the social world is being with people of your same age, right? And so when you talk to like unschoolers and you talk about even Sudbury schoolers about like sociability and things like that, like you guys know you can be friends with people of different ages and it's like totally okay. And the beauty of that is age mixing, and the beauty of that is that age mixed socialization happens in the actual real world. Like I'm 43 years old. My friends are not all 43 years old. That's like an artificial environment, right?
Yeah.
And so like the age mixing part is really the beauty of unschooling. I think it's the very less known and definite benefit that you get to make friends with people of all ages. It's absolutely okay, and it's very real world. Video game conversation was amazing. Read Peter Gray stuff. He has a lot to say about it. Also, like I work with people who like you can learn a lot from playing video games all day. Let me just leave it at that. Like definite. I know many a person who played video games all day as grown unschoolers and became coders or video game creators. So there's that. And then the whole like spending your first year of college wondering what you're going to do. That's such a great point. What I do see, and this is a personal observation, probably a research-based observation as well. When you are in an environment that values your opinion and values your critical thought and values your time, you get to the place where you have greater time and you have greater maturity to think about things like, what do I really want to do? Like, what do I really want to do outside of what my parents want me to do, outside of what people expect of me? What do I myself really want to do? And I think that's something we don't see. I mean, public school is full of expectation. You are expected to choose a major after you leave public school. You are expected to do something like that makes you successful, whatever that means. Like in my family, it was you're expected to be a doctor, lawyer, or professor. I swear my parents didn't love me until I got my PhD, and that sounds sad, right? But it's a little bit true. But I think that they would probably agree. But what like society deems like successful may or may not be what everyone else deems as successful. So yeah, there's that thing. And I absolutely think that homeschooling and unschooling and Sudbury schooling does give people time and space and maturity and critical thinking to really think about things like, what am I going to do? What do I want to do? What do I like?
Sorry.
All right,
Yeah,
now I've officially
there's
talked.
like so many different definitions for what success really is to someone. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people I've talked to, like, so I'm very much into playing this card game called Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
And every Friday night I go and I play with a bunch of other people who like to play. It's like a casual tournament, and there's a guy there I like to talk to quite a bit, and he's a very like I think like, he's a construction worker guy. Like, he's very hard, and like we were talking about like what I was gonna do because he's like he's not mean in any way. He's very nice, but it's very interesting. His definition of success is like having a nice job and making a proper salary, but it didn't seem to include like happiness. And like to me, success doesn't necessarily mean money. Like to me, success means like like happiness and really finding what I love to do in life. Now, that's what I think success is. I don't really care how much money I make. I mean, that's what me and my mom get into a lot is that she sees money as freedom and like options. And I understand that, but like, I think for what I want, I don't think I need too much money to explore all the options.
I know Dylan, I guess, personal dream is that he wants to be able to be like disconnected. He doesn't want to be, I guess he has this like reliable on anyone. He wants to be like, like a hermit in the woods, not relying on anyone.
I
Like,
think that'd be really cool.
yeah, like I think that's really cool too. Like you're not connected to anything. You're not relying on, like, he doesn't like not relying on anyone, like not relying on public water, not relying on going to the grocery store, like completely self-sustainable. Like, and that's really cool.
That is so cool. And I agree. I mean, I agree as much as, right, I'm a person that has advanced degrees. Please do not tell this to anyone because I have student loans and a mortgage. Uh, but I would do what I do without getting paid 100%, like 1,000%. I would do what I do without getting paid. If I didn't have a mortgage or student loans.
Yeah.
And that sort of adds up. So Dylan, if you want to be like that hermit in the woods, be financially independent. You have to have or frugal, I guess. Like
Now, we got a question in the YouTube chat that said,
oh yay,
yeah, said what was your awakening moment? So I guess that would mean like what was your moment that you were, I guess, awakened to? Oh, Dylan's gone now apparently.
Darn, Dylan.
All right, Dylan's back.
I got a pop-up said I'm 20% low on battery even though my phone's charging, so that's great.
But it says, so I guess that means like, what was your awakening moment to, I guess, maybe not necessarily unschooling or sub schooling, but just alternative education in general.
Yeah,
so,
great question.
Who wants to go first?
Go for it. Do you want me to go first? Or you want someone else to?
You should go. You can go first. I don't care.
Okay. So my wake-up moment, I lived a very, very traditional life until my son was born. And you have to remember that my son was born to a 20-year-old single mother who didn't know what she was doing. And so it was when I realized that like you can create a life and you have complete control of that life. Right. And then later on when my son was like 4 and 5 and I realized that he was so curious and he was learning all the time anyway, right? I didn't have to send him to school to learn. I think that moment, probably in the year 2000, was my big wake up moment too. Like that people didn't need to go to school to learn. But like learning and schooling were two separate things. And so, yeah, that was definitely the wake up moment. My son's birth was the wake up moment to sort of a more alternative life. And when my son was 4, was the wake up moment to the fact that school and education and learning are two completely separate things and that people are learning all the time intrinsically and inherently. It's a great question. Go. I want to hear yours.
Yeah. So,
Right.
Dylan, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay.
So, I think my awakening moment, like my parents, well, my dad, he's always been like, I want to say the more open-minded one. My mom was very like traditionally schooled and she did very well. And like both my parents have masters. And so they both went through lots of schooling. And my dad was more open and he always wanted to homeschool us. And I think my mom was always open to it, but she always had like an excuse of that she just wanted us out of the house because they work from home.
Yeah.
And he was like, I just want our basement is their office. So she's like, I just want to have the office to myself for a little while. And like, we all understood that. And so like my brother, I think he was in like first grade. So my mom had only had the house to herself for like 2 years. And my dad had always been curious and wanted us to be homeschooled, but it was kind of like a pipe dream. And but eventually it just got to the point where like it was necessary, at least for me. Like I just could not stand going to school anymore. It was like it just wasn't. It was a matter of fact thing. Like
Yeah.
living with a panic attack twice a week was like not a sustainable way of being like being a human being. So it was like we were kind of forced into it, but it was something we wanted to. So it was a little bit of both. But like definitely my awakening moment. I like kind of, this is an odd thing, but I was in like, we just went to the orthodontist and I was getting out and we were like, I was like, it was like this. I had this drive. I was like, I have to go find alternative education schools. Like, it was just like that. And I was like, I know they're out there. I have to find them. This is after like a year of homeschooling. And it was just like, it just popped in my head. And like right when I got home, I looked it up and I've just found Sudbury School like as one of the options for alternative education. And I like, as a joke, like really as a joke, I just typed it into Google, like South Jersey Sudbury School. And I was like, but like, boop, like South Jersey Sudbury School opening this summer. And it was like July. So we are like, oh, awesome. It was like completely random.
That is so cool.
So Nia, you can, what?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that your dad always wanted to do it. So many times in research, it said like the moms were the ones to make the decision to unschool. So I think it's rather cool that your dad really wanted to do it.
I know. He was always the one that was very interested in homeschooling and alternative education.
I think that's so cool. That's an awesome story, man.
Yeah.
And Neil, what's your?
So I so I was originally like at a, I don't know how old I was. I must have been 6 or 7, something like that. I don't know. I was homeschooled and I just really hated it. I cannot stand it. I was extremely resistant. And this is not strict homeschooling even. It was just we'd sit down for like an hour, my mom and I, an hour or two, and just like go through like, basic stuff. But I just could not stand it. I just hated it. It was so I was totally resistant. I could not stand it. And my mom always said that, I was always asking questions and doing all this. But when she started homeschooling, after a while, I started kind of just starting to accept it and not asking questions, just sitting down and doing the work. And she was like, oh, well, he's getting used to it now. So like she thought that was normal and stuff. But then she realized, well, I mean, is that, a good thing for that to be happening for not to be asking questions and doing all this anymore? And that's when, and she discovered unschooling. My mom and dad did it through, it was a conference that was happening in Texas called RE Rethinking Everything.
Oh, yeah.
And they just wanted to go there. And I at the point, I didn't understand what it was. I just didn't care. It's like, oh, we're going to Texas. That sounds fun. So we went there and, I had a lot of fun, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't really care to at that time, I guess. But I know there was a whole thing with kids, so I was, having fun with that. But so my mom and my dad, my mom, when we were still in Texas, mom started slowly like lifting restrictions. She's like, if you want to sit down and, watch TV, you can. And so I was like, really? So I sat down, I watched TV for a little while, that branched me into another thing that I'll say after I'm done. But so eventually we got home and I don't know if it was my mom or my dad, but I think they were saying something like, we're going to try unschooling and there are going to be no restrictions on this, that, the other. We're going to stop this. And so yeah, that was really, I remember I think my dad always says this. He says that the first day, like following morning, I was like jumping back and forth between the couches. I think my sister and I, and he said, how do you feel? And I said, I feel free. And he said, that he said that he did not like hearing that because he did not like hearing that I wasn't free before. He did not like hearing that. He's like, so you weren't free before? He did not like hearing that. But that was when I got bored and I went to Sudbury School. That was, I think, my true, like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Because my mom actually found Sudbury School. She was like, oh, you hear about this? This is Sudbury School. And even she was actually kind of doubting. She was like, I don't know if you want to get up I just want to get up at a certain time every day, like the opposite of what people normally would say. She's like, I mean, I don't know if you, and I was like, I want to do it. I want to do it. I definitely want to do it. And she was like, are you sure you want? Absolutely 100%. And I was 100% on board. And I was there the first day South Jersey Secondary School opened along with Dylan. And I've been going ever since. It was around 3 years ago.
That is super cool. That's awesome.
But I wanted to say one thing really quick about what I was saying about the TV thing, because we were talking about how it's not like you can't learn. I attended an awesome talk. I think Dylan, you attended that talk too. It was a workshop at Arrow. Arrow it's the Alternative Education Resource Organization. It's a conference for alternative education. But I attended along with Dylan a workshop about video games. It was really, really good.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
It was very interesting. I really liked that workshop. And but the point is, even if kids don't normally want to play video games all day long from dawn to dusk. Sometimes they will, especially look, if you're going to deprive your kid of something they want to do, then they're going to want to do it regardless. Like, you can't be like, you cannot do this at all 100%. All he wants to do is that. My mind is blown right now. No, that makes no sense. I know my dad was having this conversation with someone, and it was really funny because they were saying, they were talking about their son. He's like, he never concentrates, just can't concentrate on anything. And I just cannot pull him away from his video games. And my dad said, so what is he doing when he's playing his video games? He's just not talking to us. He's just totally engrossed. And I say, would you call that concentration?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's interested in it. It's not like, oh, well, he's interested in video games. The point is that he's interested in things that make him want. You're interested in things that you want to discover.
Yeah, like I know I really did love the only thing I retained for a while, I didn't use it for a while, from public school was like piano. Like there's a semester of piano learning. And I got quite good at that because I was very much interested in it. And even now I've gotten kind of back into it. Like I've been trying to learn this song from this movie called La La Land.
Yeah.
I was trying to learn the City of Stars. I like that song.
I love that song.
And that's like the only thing I really retained, which is interesting because I really enjoyed it. And I didn't understand it back then because it was very early on. And like even before I knew about, like, I guess it was just common knowledge, or maybe it wasn't. I figured it out was like if you're enjoying something, you're really retaining it even more. Like I find myself not having a great memory, but with like the card game I play, I have a great memory with that. Like I can recall every single game, every single move, all the hands I've ever had. Like, well, not all the hands I've ever had, but like recall it to a point that's a little worrying.
Yeah. No.
Yes, it is, because let me just be clear here. Dylan and I we were playing this game where I would go through how many cards are in like a normal, like when they release a set of cards. How many is that?
300.
Yeah, he know if I can read out the abilities of that card, he can tell me the name, or I can tell the name. I say the name of the card, and he'll tell me every single ability that card does, how much it costs for the mana, the life, the power of that card, the toughness of that card, and yeah, it's.
But how do you not call that genius, right? Like,
yeah, that's pretty. And also, it's even more crazy to that extent is that I'll describe the picture, and he'll do all that, solicit all that information.
So amazing.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that I find really interesting. And same with music. Like, I really love music, and I only started to find the music I really liked after I left public school. And there's music I never would have found before, and I'm really good at memorizing lyrics. Not like that's not saying I like to sing. I'm good at memorizing lyrics.
Yeah.
And I realize like the stuff I'm really interested in, like the more I'm interested in something, the more I'm really good at memorizing it. Like my brother, he's like my little brother, and he learned from our school this game called League of Legends, which is a very, 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 very popular game. I think it's like the biggest video game right now in the world. It's got like 150 million people playing it. And he's gotten really into it, and he like knows all the characters, and I mean with that many people, they've come up with some crazy strategies. Even though it's a very basic, like simple game. It's not difficult to play. But like it's like chess. Like
I
you can
love
know how
chess.
to move the pieces, but you're not gonna always win the game.
Yeah,
Like
and I
even though
mean,
you know how it works.
and the thing is, Dylan, I want to say something else also with Dylan and Magic. Like I'll be looking at my hand and judging by how I'm conscious, because he'll know which deck I'm playing. Like, because you make your own deck, and like give me a deck that he made, and or we'll have a bunch. We have a bunch of decks where I'll be using a deck, and he'll say, and because he knows the deck, and I'm concentrating a certain way, he'll be like, I know which card you have in your hand. That wouldn't work right now if you did this. And just by like, and that gets endlessly irritating after a little while, but. And also, and I mean, giving off, so and also the thing about video games is, what I really like about video games is not just the video gaming, but the story behind them. I have, actually, if I go into how many tabs do I have open in Wikipedia on like video game lore? One, two, just right now, one, two, I have 2 tabs open right now. But because I just really, I recently read, because people don't understand this, but like, because Halo, the first person shooter, has a lot of lore. And I just recently read one of the books from the Halo book series. There's a lot of books. It's called Halo First Strike. Oh, it was great. The writing was very nice. And I also want to read that's my 3rd favorite game series. My first favorite is Elder Scrolls because the mythology behind it and the way it's just they construct the world is just really, really cool. And the concepts on time and it's just really great. There are 2 books that I want to read. I think one of them is called The Infernal City and Lord of Souls. I want to read both of those. And yeah, it's just amazing the amount of and there are people in the community, the lore community in Elder Scrolls called lore masters who have like dedicated like parts of like their life to just studying the lore. And it takes a lot to become that. And you don't get paid for that either. It's just something that you are. And people will go and ask lore masters questions like about the lore because there's a lot of people have debates about, there are like concepts, things called chim, which are in the lore and that's heavily debated upon. The most debated upon thing about chim is you pronounce it Kim or Chim, but that's the most debated part about it. But yeah, it's just really interesting. And I'll be sitting just on Wikipedia, just reading these articles and stuff like that. And I just really like doing that. And I mean, it is a story too. People don't understand. Like some people just play just for the heck of it, but I played also for the story. And the fact that people are trying to separate video games, television, and movies from books, like there's this rift, like books are the pinnacle of education, and yet movies and TVs just sludge that rots your brain, and video games, they make you violent.
I think it's very interesting too. Like I remember hearing the story. I don't even know where I heard it from, but it was an adult explaining unschooling to a kid, and he asked her like, so like he was explaining unschooling, and she was like, if I could do anything I wanted, I'd only read books that I like to read. And he's like, well, what's the problem about reading books that you want to read?
Yeah, but like, it's so funny, right? Like that's awesome. So that's the power of intrinsic motivation, like the whole video games and the Halo books and like the opening tags on Wikipedia, like what is this? What is that? P.S. I wanted to ask, like, do your teachers play those card games with you? Do they know how to play?
Well, that's actually how I learned it was from our staff member, Brian. He taught me how to, well, Neil and Brian taught me how to play.
Yeah.
And that's why staff members at Sudbury have the best jobs.
And it's hilarious because because Dylan's better than Brian, and every time Dylan beats Brian is such a sore loser.
That's so awesome. Okay, so that was my question. Like, do your teachers?
It's pretty funny. Like, so
He's
Brian
funny.
has been playing for 10 years longer than I have. And like
every time Dylan wins, it's the deck is wrong. He drew something wrong. Every time Brian wins, it's amazing. It's amazing. He's just an amazing player. Every time Dylan wins, the deck was wrong. Something happened. This happened. This happened. No, every time Dylan wins, something went wrong.
So I am totally and completely jealous of your teachers. Do you call them teachers or do you call them facilitators?
Probably staff members because I mean technically they're not teachers. Brian majored in economics, so we can't really call them teachers, and we don't want to call them teachers because we don't want to give that misconception.
Right.
They are really just staff members.
Cool. Okay. And I've heard the word facilitators too in like some.
I do think it's funny though. Like, so Brian will like sometimes go to the card shop I go to and play, and when like I have a lot of friends there, and they're like, "Oh, how do you know him?" And he's like, the best way I explain it is like, "Oh, he's well, kind of my teacher."
Yeah, it's kind of my teacher.
It's like it would be quite strange to invite your teacher to go play Magic with you.
Yeah,
I don't really understand that. And it was very funny. There, I was explaining it to someone who was new there and didn't really know about it, like at my card shop. And someone to my right, a good friend of mine, was like, "Oh, you go to a Sudbury school?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I'm actually on the board of directors for the Fairly Free School."
Oh, so awesome.
Yeah,
You never know.
Well,
he's really cool too.
he's a really cool
You
guy.
never know. That's
And
so awesome. So
we got into a whole talk about unschooling and homeschooling.
that's,
It was like completely random.
see, and that's like, I think that's the, like you spoke, Dylan, about community. And I think that's like, right. Like you feel a sense of community. It's like not really your teacher, but it's staff, and it's like you learn and you play with. Like it's so awesome. I think like one of the things I'm trying to look for as a researcher, right? As a researcher with the feet in two worlds, right? The unschooling world and the public schooling world, is how do I reconcile the two, and how do I teach teachers in public schools how to do more Sudbury type things, or how to do more like unschooly type things, and how much better school would be when they do that. So yeah, so I talk to my teachers about strengths and interests all the time, and authentically like being involved in like students' lives, just like your staff member like plays cards with you and things like that. Like that stuff is super important. And then I love, Neil, that you talked about like TV and
Yeah.
movies and video games like not being of a separate, like these are not of separate realm for books. I always talk to my teachers about this like expanded view of literacy. Like literacy is not just reading books. Literacy is listening to things and listening to audio and like watching TV. And literacy is doing all like opening up tags on Wikipedia about games and stuff. Like that's all literacy. There's such an expanded view of literacy. And I think that like that message needs to be sent too, that it's not just like reading
Like,
books that are going to
you
teach
can
you.
read and write, which is
Actually, one second, not to stop you guys. I have to plug in my phone somewhere because
Yeah.
I thought I had it plugged in, but it's not charging, and my phone's at 3%.
Go for it.
So you
Well-
guys keep talking. I just need to find a place to plug.
So I think a problem I have with people talking about, because literacy traditionally is just reading and writing, right? That is the definition of literacy. You need to be able to read and write, and you're literate. Otherwise, you're illiterate. What people don't understand is if you're not computer literate, you're not going to be able to succeed you're not be able to go very far. I mean, people, you don't really that often go to say, hey, I'd like to apply for a job. No, you do it through email. Are you kidding me? No, this is not, we do it through things through email now. We do things through this and that. And something that really gets me is that I got into this very long debate with this woman spanning weeks about the internet. And I mean, I was just saying, and she was saying, why can't you just
I want to know what woman is this?
yeah. She's like, why can't you just go to the library? I just go, excuse me, are you trying to compare 300 books to the entirety of the collective wealth of human knowledge, the collective of all of humanity's knowledge put together, 300 books? No, get out of my face with that stuff. Stop. That's not going to work. That's ridiculous. And then she brings up such an argument that I still count as one of the stupidest arguments to this day. Well, when you go, they have computers at the library. Wait, if you have computers at the library, why can't you use your computer at home? And then she says, well, the librarians can direct you to certain sites. Like, what? Wikipedia.com. Why do I need to drive get my keys, put them in the ignition, turn the car on, drive out of my driveway, go to the library, park the car, go into there and ask them, how do I get on Wikipedia? Like, that's ridiculous. When you have a font, when you like, I want to know this thing. All right, let me just get my keys and go to the library. No, like, yes, that's how it used to be. But but cholera is how it used to be. We don't do that anymore either. We're not cholera. We're not people that get cholera and die anymore. Okay, we're the people that go on the internet now. All right, we don't. Like, if you want to go, the library is great. I like the library. The library is great. You can get books. Books are cool.
Shout out to libraries.
Yeah, the libraries are cool. But to say the internet and the library are two different things. If you want stories, okay, go to the library. If you want to read a certain book about education, you go to the library. But to say that if you want to learn a topic, a broad topic, then you should probably go to the internet. If you want to learn a very specific topic in a very specific book, go to the library. It's a great resource. Your public library, great system because it's free.
Yeah.
But the internet, and you don't have to pay for a connection and stuff, but the internet, other than that, is free.
So interesting, right? So like all of that stuff that you just thought of, right, is I think it's such a testament to like your schooling and your education, because like you're talking about I have to get in my car, I have to use gas, I have to go to the parking lot. It's going to take me like 15 minutes to do that. Go in there, use a computer at the library. I could do it at home. Like stuff like that takes great critical thought and is actually also a really great time management skill that I think will like, it's probably one of the best skills you could have as you
Also, talk about social skills. It's going to be really embarrassing to go up to the library and say, "Hi, can you help me get on the internet?" And it's just,
But I will tell you, right, that one of the things that unschoolers and Sudbury schoolers and homeschoolers do really well is they know how to learn things, right? It's one of the things we learn from research. So like, you know about like the resources, like even if you don't use them, you know what the library could
I
do.
think the great thing, I think a way to summarize that, it's a great way, is that people we know how we learn how to learn.
Yes, you guys learn how to learn and you really know how to use the resources you have in the world super well. Like you know what's something I could look up at Wikipedia and what may be something I could ask a librarian about. Like I do think libraries are great resources, but I think you know the difference between like going to the library to use the computer and like asking a librarian of something that maybe she only knows and you
Exactly.
don't about the Dewey Decimal System or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a huge proponent to alternative schooling and unschooling and homeschooling is that like you know how to learn and you know how to seek out resources. Also, like time management, like you obviously, Neil, know how to time manage. You know it's going to take you like half hour more to go to the library and use a computer when you could be using the computer in your house, in your room. So yeah, I get completely awesome time management skills too. That's awesome. What you got for me, Dylan?
Oh, wait. Need my questions.
All right.
What did you say, Dylan? Oh, he's getting his questions.
He's getting his questions.
Okay, good. Because I have questions too after he's done.
All right, go for
I
it.
forgot. I was getting set up. I thought I had everything set up. My phone was plugged in, and then it says my phone's not charging.
And then I'm obsessed with the painting in your room. But anyway.
Don't worry, Dylan. It's just because you're a failure. Don't worry.
Oh, that's my brother. No, but all right. Do you think is there like a wrong way, do you think, to do unschooling? You know,
No, I don't ever think there's a wrong way. I think the only wrong way is when like someone's health or safety is in jeopardy. But otherwise, there is no wrong way. And I kind of think that with everything, right? Like there's no wrong way to teach. There's no wrong way to unschool. There's no wrong way to do anything except for when health or safety are in jeopardy, period.
And like, all right, here's someone like, what would you say to someone who's an unschooling skeptic?
Oh,
like
every single person in my life.
Every single person we meet. Like, what's the first thing you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I don't try to, it's so funny, right? So I'm in a weird position because again, I work in a school of public education. I don't really advertise my research probably as much as I should. I don't ever try to convince anyone that like unschooling or Sudbury schooling is the right way to go because I know that the right way to go is the right way for you, period. So I generally like talk mostly about how unschooling can really enhance intrinsic motivation and self-determination. And honestly, like that's the key that unlocks things, right? Like when I talk about unschooling to people, I always talk about intrinsic motivation and I always talk about self-determination and I always talk about like individual right. And there's like the key that unlocks everything. And so that's why I love like starting out my research. If you look at my progressions of writing, I did start heavily writing about like self-determination theory and D. Ryan's cognitive evaluation theory, and then moved on to homeschooling and unschooling. And I think that's actually an appropriate like sort of developmental standpoint because that's how I open the door. And once we start talking about intrinsic motivation and learning, and once we start talking about freedom in learning and autonomy, that's where the conversation about like homeschooling and unschooling comes in. So that's really how I unlock that door.
That is really interesting. And I think this one I'm very curious about. What, like for you, what was your most surprising result in all of your studies?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's always surprising to me. That's such a good question. I actually want to think about it more before I like.
Yeah, take your time, totally.
But I actually think it's always surprising to me even though I know that unschooling can be super successful, like those 2 young adult unschooling studies were super interesting to me because a majority of our respondents were financially independent, which I thought was very interesting, and partially because and partially because they learned about, like, they learned how to use money as a tool. Like, so like money became this, like, I know if I want to do this, then I have to do this. So I think the financial independence part was really interesting. I did not expect that a lot of unschoolers would be financially independent. I mean, I honestly can't even say that I'm financially independent in terms of like not owing anything to anyone in terms of mortgage or student loans or anything, but unschoolers really do know how to do that. I also thought it was interesting that there were unschoolers that went into STEM careers, and you know, a pretty significant percentage. And something I expected, probably, but still love, was that people who unschool would generally pick unschooling or Sudbury schooling for their own child. I always thought that was an interesting question. Like, we asked, like, would you pick this lifestyle for your own child? And a majority said yes. And that's always a good thing, like for the future of unschooling and homeschooling and Sudbury schooling.
Yeah, it's like exponential growth.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. When I started unschooling, I think when I started homeschooling, it was like 2% of the population homeschooled, and now it's way more than that.
Oh. Yeah, that is really awesome. I'm really like I'm really happy to be in a community like this, and to a certain extent, it feels like we have a secret that no one else knows. And I also think what's really interesting, at least for me, was when I had that moment when I realized something about unschooling is like I had this really big hole in my life and like a pretty big problem that I'd been struggling with for a long time, and just like that, it was like solved.
Yeah.
It was like very smooth and easy, and I was like, this is like too good to be true. And it makes me wonder if there's things out there just like on like the Sudbury schools that I have no idea that exist, but would fix every single problem. And it's so interesting because it really makes you think sometimes. Because I know it was like, even for my parents, it was a big problem. And like the Sudbury school just fixed it instantly. Like no questions asked, no downsides. And I know they're happy with it because my mom gets the house to herself. And I mean, we're very interested in every single thing we do. Like my middle brother, he's very interested in filmmaking. And he always kind of had been, but he never had the time to like really indulge himself in it. And
we actually went through filming. He's still editing it.
Yeah, for 8 months.
Yeah, he filmed. We're filming. Oh, we filmed. Dylan, his brother Daniel, he's talking about, and we filmed a movie where Dylan and Daniel were at, also their little brother. He played a small part in it. It's a horror movie. He got killed off in like the first minute.
I was gonna ask to see it, but now that there's violence, I'm like, no.
Yeah. And it's really well done. I mean, we had to haul out all of our so if we had to, from our school to the place where we were filming, because we were in a massive camp, you'd have to haul
700 acres of camp.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So you have to haul out all the equipment there, set it up. We put our costumes on that we had. I ruined a sweatshirt and sweatpants because it was drenched in fake blood. And I had to wear that every time that we did that. And every single time, I basically get like a dunk. Every day we're going to film, I get like a fake dunked on me. And the fake blood was made out of molasses. So walking through the woods with molasses sticking, was gross. And then I had these skin things put on me, so it would look really gross and disgusting.
You can look up to Gina. Daniel, he made a great video. Like school meeting told him to make, well, he wanted to too, but we told him to make like an intro video. And Neil's like the host of the whole thing, and they run around school explaining it to everyone. And it's really well done.
It's called Sudbury School Intro for New Students, and it's on our YouTube channel, Sudbury School. The quality is really bad because Brian messed it up. Let me explain just really quick why Brian messed that up. When we posted it to YouTube, Brian saw, because YouTube has an auto stability feature that absolutely sucks. So when you auto stabilize it on YouTube, and Brian just saw, oh, there's an auto stabilize option. When you click that, it automatically brings down the resolution of your video and it makes your video more shaky. The auto stability feature of YouTube is the worst. So yeah, it's a little shaky and the graphics are not good, but I do like how it came out other than that.
It looks really nice, and the editing I think is really good in it.
I really like that you guys have a YouTube channel, so I'm gonna check that out. It's so funny, like I'm not as into YouTube.
Oh yeah. Also our workshop that we gave our talk on Arrow was
That's
on.
what I wanted to see. That's on the okay. So I wanted to see that. Yeah, I definitely wanted to see that. It's so funny because I don't use probably because I'm not such a visual learner and I don't use YouTube as much as I probably should. I'm much more like audio based or like text based. But yeah, okay. So I'm glad you have a Sudbury channel because
we were really happy with how our workshop came out. We were expecting maybe like 15 people, but we had 40 plus people there.
I totally wish I stayed for that. I was like running out after my talk and then I was so happy we connected again because I felt bad. Like I was like, oh, I'd really like to go to that. I had to teach the next day and then had to leave, but I keep saying, so Dylan, you mentioned like it being like this great big secret, right? And like all of a sudden it just like cured the whole world. So you have to understand, and I think you do understand this by now, right? Like I teach public school teachers all year long. Like I love my job. I love what I do. And I don't talk about homeschooling. If it comes up, I'll talk about it, but I don't really talk about my research that much in my job. So I walk into Arrow and it's literally, Dylan, it's like you felt like all of a sudden, like I walked into Arrow so stressed and I was like dressed in my like professor clothes and I walked into Arrow and like literally I breathed for like the first time in like years and not years, probably the last time I was at Arrow and I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people.
Yeah.
No, I'd never been around people who were like-minded around unschooling. And it was so interesting and I was very prepared and I had I was fairly well dressed.
Yeah, we were like
I was like, oh, these are just unschoolers and everyone's in their pajamas. I get it.
It was great because I mean, Dylan and we talked to this really nice gentleman who was starting a project called Ascend Texas.
Yeah.
It was a free school in Texas and it was on a camp and it looked amazing. And he was actually trying to like pick our brain with our ideas, like this is awesome. And we were talking to him for a while and it was after he attended our workshop. And it was just great.
So awesome.
And it was really interesting too. We got to meet this woman from Colombia who had started free school. She was very interesting.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
I feel like I feel like I always should do like more unschooling conferences and I tend not to because it's hard for me during the year to make this switch. But then I realize like I go to Arrow and I'm like, these are my people. And then like I talk to you guys and like I'm like, oh, this is like the best interview I ever had. And like because of you guys, not because of like anything I said, but because of you. And then like I go to these things and I'm like, this is amazing. It's just sometimes hard in my brain to like I have to I'm again.
I think it's really interesting. The guy when we were doing our workshop, the guy who was setting up all the equipment, we were at the front of the room.
Yeah.
And he looked at us and he was like, oh, are you guys running it? We were like, yeah, we are. And he's like, wow, that's really awesome. And I thought like part of what I thought our workshop was so interesting was like, it was like the students at the front of the classroom.
Yes.
And we were like the teachers. And I thought that was so amazing.
Yeah.
Like switching roles.
Yeah.
Or traditional roles, I should say.
Yeah. And for me, it's a bit of cognitive dissonance because, again, I literally came out of teaching a teacher intensive for 2 weeks to New York City public school teachers, which I love the work I do. I love that I have the honor to teach teachers and I can open their minds about things like intrinsic motivation and self-determination and things. But I also loved it was really a breath of fresh air. Like, it's like exactly what you said. It's like a secret that nobody knows, right? And like, that's how I felt while I was unschooling my kid too. I think I miss that so much. Like I miss like being an unschooled parent or an unschooling parent. I miss like getting to do things during the day like that I'm not told to do. And that's why I do my research. My research is like fun to me. It's like a game. It's literally like your card game is my research. That's how it is.
Yeah. Definitely. I know. It's great too. Like I love like magic has been incredible. Like that's what it's called. Well, people call it magic.
Yeah.
It's been incredibly influential on me. Like it gives you great like comprehensive decision making.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to think like, what am I going to do 4 turns from now? Like what what decision is going to give me the greatest chance of winning. And it's such like a mental game, and that's what I love so much about it is like messing with Neil, because like you can see it's called telegraphing in Magic, where you can when you know what someone is going to play against you, and it's like I'm telegraphing to you that I'm going to play this, and you try your best to make it not obvious, but Neil like hasn't
Yeah,
played
it's
all
like
that much, so it's very obvious, and I love like it's like I love that mental side of it, and another way it's really influential was like when I really started out, I wasn't the greatest at math, but it's like embarrassing when you have to bring out a calculator in the middle of a game to do simple multiplication. And so you just have to like kind of figure it out. And another great thing about it is you have to learn probability because like you have to know if I keep this certain hand because you draw your 7 cards at the beginning of the game and you can choose not to keep it. You can mulligan and you take 6 cards next time. And you have to be able to decide like if I keep this hand, what is the probability of this working out for me and winning the game?
And I mean, I think that when you were Dylan, you were talking about how like, I mean, you were talking about how you had to basically figure out how to quickly do basic multiplication because of Magic, and I think that brings up another like crowning feature of suburban schools, and that's the idea. It sounds bad, but let me explain it. It's subtle peer pressure. It's not actual peer pressure. It's the fact that Brian always describes it like this. No one wants to be the one kid who can't read, or no one wants to be the one kid who can't
Shame.
write.
I think shame is one of the is one of the most worst feelings a human can possibly feel. And I think it's probably an evolutionary thing of
Definitely.
like shame is like one of the worst feelings you can possibly feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, it's not like school where it's like you're stupid or you get a failing grade. It's just the fact that you yourself want to be.
It's very matter of factly.
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. I can't do this. Everyone else can. Therefore, I want to. It's not like you're a failure. You failed. It's not like that.
It's like you don't want to be 12 years old and asking someone what the clock says.
Yeah.
That's incredibly embarrassing.
Okay, so wait, because I think this is brilliant, right? Like, so why doesn't that happen? So I strongly believe in the power of subtle peer pressure, and I love how, like, I think that should be a thing, right? I think you should like copyright it or something, right? So, but that's not really something you see in schools in a positive way, right?
Exactly, because it's not subtle peer pressure, it's direct peer pressure. Like, and also, it's not even peer pressure. When in schools, it's not even peer pressure. It's saying, you are failing at this, you're bad at this, you need to get better at it right now. And anyways, that's not even peer pressure, it's just pressure.
It's not even from the peers. A lot of the times from the teachers.
Yeah. And it's,
right. Well,
yeah.
Wait a second, because that's actually interesting, right? Because maybe that is right, because peers don't really get to like do.
You know what? I found a better word for students than subtle peer pressure. It's how about
I like that.
Desire to. Well, I mean that's a good coining term, but to explain it better, I think it's like a desire to be on par with your peers. That's a mouthful. So I'm not. Every time I say, I'll be like subtle peer pressure, but a better way to describe it is a desire to be on par with your peers. It's not, or at least on par with your peers. Subtle peer pressure, I think, is better for explaining to someone for the first time, which I will now always use it that way because it's just a lot easier to understand. But I think a better way to describe it would be subtle peer pressure based off of the desire for you to be on par with peers. Not a desire to not be shamed again, not a desire to not be humiliated, not a desire to be told that you're a failure, but just a desire to be on par with your peers. And it's, like don't say, very matter of fact.
That's so cool. But maybe kids don't. I think Dylan has a point too, right? Like, so it's basically the teachers. So in mainstream public schools, it's probably the teachers giving the subtle teacher pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Even if they're like giving positive, specific praise.
I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's subtle.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I'm honestly coming from the view that teachers mean well, like they want.
I think they absolutely do.
Some of the most avid supporters are teachers that are frustrated with the system.
Yeah, I'm coming from, like, I know that my new teachers coming in, they want to do well for kids. Like, I don't think any one of them comes into the system. They come into the system because they want to change the world, right? But then it's like that institutional cogwheel that you have to have rules, and then you get to rock the boat maybe after you have tenure, but it's still like this hard thing to do. Um, but the subtle that's so interesting. And I actually think maybe kids in traditional public schools don't get that because they don't get enough like free time to like maybe play games where peer pressure would actually be subtle, right? Because otherwise it's like, it's not really subtle. That's such an interesting, it's such an interesting thing. Anyway, such, you should totally coin it.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think that's something that makes Sudbury so interesting. Is like I was saying before about the community.
Yeah.
That, like I love about our Sudbury school is that like like a lot of our friends, or a few of them, live around here, like next where I live. Neil lives about 40 minutes away from me. But like it happens very spontaneously how we get together. It's just like in 5 minutes you could have 8 people over.
In 45 minutes, I can be there too.
Yeah. Neil wants to be there.
Are you near each other?
What?
We're 30 minutes away from each other. So the problem is everyone else is like within 5 minutes of Dylan's house. And I'm
like bike riding distance.
Gotcha.
And it's kind of funny because we'll just get together and like we're all very much into cooking. We love cooking. And
I made an amazing soup I need to tell you about, Dylan. Remind me to tell you that. I made a great soup.
And so we'll get together and we'll all make dinner and we'll all eat dinner together. And then they just ride their bikes out. And it's like such a interesting friend group. And it's really funny too. In a lot of ways, it's like having other siblings because you pretty much live with them. And it's not like our school is very big. It's only like 16 kids. So a lot of the times 19,
it's like I think
19. Oh, well, you just have to live with the people. I mean, you're spending 8 hours a day for 180 days a year with them, so it's hard to get away from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a wonderful endorsement. I hang out with them because it's hard to get away from them, so might as well avoid them.
But sometimes nice when you're stuck with people.
Yeah.
That's bad. I want to like be part of your friend group.
But it's great how spontaneous like when we start to hang out can be.
And I think
like I know it's so funny. Like if someone is having a birthday party, it can take like you have to send all the invites and write everything. And for me, like my birthday is in 2 days.
Oh, I can come, by the way. I never texted you.
Happy birthday.
So it was like in 3 minutes, I sent out texts to like 10 people, and they all just said whether they could come or not. And it wasn't like a big deal. It was just like, hey, can you come? Can you come? And we're just going to hang out and make pizzas. And that's going to be my birthday party.
So I can't come, by the way. I didn't text Dylan.
Wait, you can come or can't?
I can. CAN can.
Okay. Nice.
So that's also interesting, right? Because in public schools, we talk a lot about creating a positive classroom culture, right? And I think actually Sudbury does that very well without creating a classroom culture.
I would want to add that like when we were first, it was like maybe we were halfway through my first year. It was the summer after our first year, and my mom was still slightly skeptical about it. And so some years we like to go to Vermont and go cliff jumping.
So awesome.
But so it was incredibly random. It was a great cliff jumping spot. Like it's like legal to jump there and it's all free and it's super safe because there's no way you would like hit, like it'd be almost impossible. You'd have to try to kill yourself. And,
God.
Well, I guess, no, but you know what I mean? And by just luck, there's a place where you can set up chairs and blankets and stuff. And right next to us, this woman was like a professor all about learning, like an alternative education at the University of Vermont. And my mom just started to get in this whole conversation.
Oh my gosh, can we hook us up?
it was completely random.
That's so cool.
And she was like, well, and my mom was very like skeptical about how Sudbury students could ever get to college if they wanted to. She was like, well, my students who are from Sudbury, they're like the best at asking questions and learning. They're really, really amazing at learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's what my mom got her more into it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, so my son, in his first year of college, I think like he struggled with things like taking notes. He didn't know that was a thing, right? Because you never take notes in unschooling, right? So like the taking notes part was a thing, and like the having a calendar part was a thing. But in the end, my son graduated with 3.97 in college, and it was like because he knew how to learn and he knew how to ask questions and he knew how to like be assertive and advocate when he needed to be assertive and advocate. And he really knew how to be himself. And I think that's actually, so maybe Dylan, that's the secret. So maybe the secret is actually that like Sudbury and unschooling and homeschooling actually creates an environment where you can just be who you are.
Right, because you see a lot of times people are, I don't mean, I hate, like you're saying, you hate using the word mainstream. I hate using the term basic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because it's also, it can be insulting to people who just want to be that way. But I'm trying to say like, it's the exact same system for every single kid, no matter what. So you're going to mold them into what's what I'm looking for. You're going to mold
like the public, like molded into the public school creature.
Right, you're going to mold it into the perfect creature like of their creation. And obviously it's not going to work the exact same way for everybody, but it's still the fact that, and the thing about Sudbury schools and unschooling things like, and other things like that is it molds.
I really like the
curriculum molds around the kid instead of the other way around. The kid molds around the curriculum. The curriculum.
This is how I think of it. Like I think a lot of things, like when I'm thinking about something, it's very visual and physical. Like in my mind, I imagine a conveyor belt of like different shaped figures. But there's like one mold in this, like really trying to squeeze around this thing, but it just can't. And like it keeps refusing it. And like I imagine that's what public school is like. Like that's my example of what public school is. It's like people of all different shapes and sizes trying to be stuffed into this mold and contorted into something that they're not, and it like just won't work.
So I remember writing to Peter when we did our first study and being like, oh, the title of our study should be "We Don't Need No Education," right? Like is it Pink Floyd? The Pink Floyd song in like the video where you're like,
don't need no
education. Right. So like, and he's like, yeah, good try, Gina, but no, probably not fitting. But so I think that, and I don't know if it's meaningful, right? Like, I don't know if, I don't think teachers want, like, I don't think that that's public school teachers' goal is to mold.
No, I don't think it is either.
I really don't. But I do think that the institution itself, because of, you have a classroom teacher and
by design itself, the design cannot be, it's not like there are these people up there sitting, we're going to mold the students into
no. And I think that that's where like when you read Gatto or where you read it, I love John Taylor Gatto. I have my students read essays about that he wrote all the time, but sometimes I think you see a lot of like public school is evil and this is why, and it's not that teachers come in and are like, I want to mold and create. That's not what any of my teachers are.
It's just the way the system is designed, and it's just how it is.
And what's interesting about it is I think the system probably, like my next project is to really write a book about how unschoolers and Sudbury schoolers and homeschoolers can affect public school curriculum and can learn from them, right? So I think that's part of it. And then the other part, like, so I'll always say that public school serves a purpose in the world and is not inherently evil and is actually inherently a very good thing for some people, right? I'll always say that. And then I also like talk about like the code switching thing. So you know how in schools, like we talk about code switching sometimes in terms of race and ethnicity, but also there's like a public school code kind of, right? Like it's like when you talk about like the molding where you have to be this type of person. And I think that's where it creates a lot of pressure for kids. I think some people are just not going to fit into the public school mold. You can't put, they're just not going to fit. And I think that homeschooling and Sudbury schooling and unschooling are just a great option. Not everyone's going to fit in the same mold. That's not what humans are like.
No, one of my best friends, I met him from Magic too, and he really likes public school.
Yeah.
It's just his thing. Like he really likes doing, I think all the side curriculum, like he's very much into like theater and a cappella. Like his group just went to.
I was a theater kid.
Oh, you were, yeah.
Yeah.
His group just went to
You can't
like,
tell.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Neil is
can't
too,
tell.
Yeah, I'm in the theater too.
but I've never really been into it.
I'm surprised because Dylan has like the type of personality like really outgoing, which is very common among theater kids.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. I mean, but I'll never say public school doesn't have
Right,
its
because I mean, more power to the people that are able that can be in that system. That's awesome because I mean, it's an incredible resource. If you think about the positives of it, like all these subjects into one day. I mean, oh my God, that's so cool. And if you're able to actually, if because we were always, let's be clear, we were kind of trash talking public school a little bit. I mean, if all of that, isn't applicable to your situation and you're able to, that's awesome because it is an incredible resource. It's an incredible free resource. It's just really awesome. But I mean, and I think that's also something that needs to be said. I mean, nothing is for every child is different. No child, you can't be like, this is the formula for the child. No, that's not how it works. It's going to be, I think that the public school system, I don't think they understand that, even though that there are kids that do fit into there. I don't think they all understand that. So
it's also sheer numbers, and I think that's
right.
People don't understand. Like I talked about, like remember the guy who spoke? Were you there when the school administrator Michael Hines spoke? Were you there?
Yeah, he was like the principal, right? Or
yeah, he was like the administrator of,
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so when he was talking, I was thinking a lot about like public schooling and how he does it, and I was thinking like, I mean, he's doing like the best he can in the district, right? He's like opening up time for play, and he's doing a lot of.
I thought that was listening to that. I thought it was so funny because like he's thinking of it as like this brand new idea. Like that's what we do every day.
Yeah, I know. But you have to understand.
He's like, this is a brand new concept that we just made up, and it's worked phenomenal for us. It's like, yeah, we know.
Dear God.
I know. No, that is so true. And you have to understand that I was homeschooling in like the 1990s, right? So like before anyone else was doing it, really. So I sat there with my son and I'm like, yeah, he thinks this is brand new. But also he made an excellent point because you have to understand to schools and school districts, this is all brand new. This is
no, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is really groundbreaking, brand new stuff. And that's why like schools now, like they go through phases and the big catchword is like being like social emotional learning. So we're doing a lot of professional development on social emotional learning. And I'm thinking, my gosh, like this is not hard, right? And this is also what we've known, like the three of us have known throughout all of schooling, like it's important to take care of kids' emotions.
Yeah, it's not all that new information.
Yeah,
we've had this for like a long time.
Right. It's not this groundbreaking thing that we have to take care of people's souls or that we have to like think about mental health or wellness. But you do have to understand it's like,
oh my God, guys, how about we make the kids happy?
Yeah, like how about we think of happiness and what that is?
My God, these kids, they're having fun? What is this concept?
What is that fun?
Let me log this. What is fun?
Notice, I mean, if you notice in his talk, his school district has been audited several times for kids having too much fun. So I thought that was interesting too. But yeah, so you have to understand that we're about 30 years behind there. So all this stuff is real new. I often wonder if public schooling will be much like unschooling, homeschooling, or Sudbury schooling in 50 years. I mean, I don't know.
I would not be surprised because if you look at,
like what's he said that he looked at, what's the country that has like the highest scores? I think it's.
Yeah, I don't want to talk for him, and I wish I could.
Yeah. Well, I think it's Denmark, and I heard this from somewhere else.
I think it is.
And Denmark, I was watching this whole video about like, oh my God, Denmark has the highest scores for the longest time. They had the lowest scores. What changed? It's like we just got rid of homework, and the kids don't have to do all that much stuff. It's like, well, we figured that out too.
Yeah, and like the same thing with like intrinsic motivation, like. Richard Ryan came down to New York City Public Schools, New York City Board of Ed, and did a professional development on intrinsic motivation in public schools like a year ago. Has it caught on yet? No, because I do professional developments too about it, and it hasn't caught on yet. I often wonder what happens when it does, and like when we give public school kids more autonomy and things like that, it should be very, very interesting.
I think that, and I mean, I so and I feel like I was just trying to say I was just wanting to say earlier with the fact that the society is always progressing. And I'm not saying that this is exactly where it's going. I'm saying that society is going to progress. And even though there's going to be resistance, there always is, progress always wins. It's not up for debate. Progress always wins. And I think it always will win because that's just how it is. And, um, but, and if you look at just how many, like if you asked someone way back in the day, do you think we'll ever stop using, corporal punishment in schools? Oh, absolutely not. The kids will never be able to concentrate without, a big punishment awaiting if they don't. They'll never going to happen. It just is not how it's done. And yeah, so that's just, I think people need to understand before they start denying like, oh, that'll never happen. Well, think about how people used to think. And, how are we different? And we're really not, if you think about it. I'm not saying, I don't mean the fact that kids are beaten. I mean the fact that we're resisting the change.
Sure.
But yeah, so I did want to ask you a question really quick about, so I guess because, you did, so I was wondering, better for everyone watching too, it's like, what exactly was the purpose of the study and the results of the study, based off the purpose?
Yeah. So I've done a bunch of studies.
So I mean, the one that I guess you tout the most about. I think you talking about you're talking about a study at Arrow about unschooling, and I don't know what exactly the outcome or something like that.
The ones I did with Dr. Peter Gray are all very grounded theory ethnographic studies. And all that means is that we weren't trying to find out anything real, like we didn't have a hypothesis. We were just trying to find out more. Homeschoolers and unschoolers it's hard to get a lot of participants. I think some are very resistant to, participating in studies for very many reasons, and I could totally understand why. But we wanted to do a large-scale study of unschooling to learn more about the movement is really what we wanted to do. And through that, we wanted to know more about outcomes, because when you're studying a movement, you always want to know more about like outcomes and what happens when these people are adults and things like that. Mm-hmm. So those studies I do with Peter Gray studies I did with Peter Gray were not really trying to find out anything per se, but we were just trying to learn more and just trying to touch the surface. And then hopefully our study would have been our study is cited a lot of times because it gives a grounding to the movement. And so that was really the groundbreaking thing about our study. It's still, I think, the largest scale study of unschoolers.
I do. I think I have one more question since I think we should start winding down.
Yeah.
So, like, what in your mind, what is your reasoning for wanting to do all the studies? Like, what do you want to get out of it? Do you want to, like, change people's minds or just have the information out there?
Yeah, I think,
your own curiosity.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons, right? I think I'm not in the business of changing people's minds about anything. I'm really in the business of just exploring because it's interesting and it's interesting to me. I do all this research for free. I don't get paid for it. It's total. And let me tell you, it takes time. I think I probably minimize the amount of time it takes to write a study, and you're talking years. So I do it because I'm curious about it. It's probably selfish. I also do it because I knew what a hard time myself and my own child had trying to explain our decision to others. So I kind of joke all the time that I'm doing these studies for my grandchildren that are not born yet. And I say this all the time, I joke about it, and I'm doing it to make the decision easier and more quantifiable for others. I hope that people can show their relatives or their friends or whoever's the doubters these studies and say to other people, look, it has been done, and look, the outcomes are super successful.
I totally resonate with that because it's a lot of people they really want substance. It's well, there it is.
Here it is.
Yeah. I think a lot of people change people's minds. They need to see science. And I love that. and I think is really intelligent. And I really wanted to thank you, Gina, for doing what you do. I think it really helps
Um,
people get into the mindset that unschooling can
Yeah,
really
thank you. I
be
mean, this is really, I
works.
mean, I've been waiting for like a study like this, but I still have my second question really quick. So what were the, I mean, obviously outcome is a very, it's a loose term, especially when it comes to, but if you had to summarize the outcome of the studies, I mean, like, so like, how would you summarize them? Like, what were the outcomes of, the future of unschoolers and things like that?
Sure. So what we learned from the large study, the 232 families, was that, unschoolers have time. One of the benefits of unschooling is the time and space to explore interests. Another benefit of unschooling was that it really did work on us child's or a teen's self-determination and intrinsic motivation. It also gave families lots of time together, which I think was a super benefit. Family closeness was one of the benefits. In terms of outcomes, again, you know, the young adult unschooling study was important because it showed people that unschoolers can absolutely go to college. They can absolutely like find jobs without transcripts and high school diplomas and things like that. And that was just groundbreaking because I think the question people most have for me is always, well, how do these kids like find jobs or go to college if they don't have like transcripts with grades? And so that study answered that question.
The question, was it that they can, or was it also that it wasn't that difficult?
They can, and it wasn't that difficult. I mean, yes, it was like an alternative acceptance like kind of thing, but it wasn't so difficult. It wasn't like this big thing. Most times, like a lot of times people told stories of going into college admissions offices and talking about their education, and the admissions officer was like, great, when do you come in? And so it wasn't, it wasn't really that hard or that big a deal. You don't need a diploma to move forward like everyone thinks you do.
And was one of the questions that, or something that you studied was, like, I don't know how satisfied they were. I know it's at 11%. I don't know what study. I think it was a smaller study that was. Where is it?
It was like it was the second unschooler study.
75. That one. That one. It said 11% of them said that they felt that they were. What was it? What was the? It was so that they felt like they somewhat they lacked some education. Somewhat, yeah.
I mean, I think people in that study, the 75, that was the older unschooler study, the unschooling adult study, talked about gaps in education. But they did talk about gaps, and they also spoke about how, it didn't really matter because they understood how to learn. And so if they had gaps, they can just go back and like fill in those gaps.
Right.
I think 3 of the 75 we interviewed did have a negative experience unschooling and homeschooling. And I think it's also important to talk about negative experiences. And all 3 of those participants also grew up in like ultra religious homes. And so that was like an interesting sort of correlation with negative experience. So again, not making any judgments because it was a qualitative study.
Right, absolutely.
75 is a small.
So did you get results that I guess corroborated the 75 people with the 200 and some study? Did the results corroborate that?
So it was 2 different studies. So one was families. So the 232 were families.
And 75 were individuals, right?
75 were young adults. So it was a little different. So like you think of the young adult study as the graduates of homeschooling and unschooling, and then the 200 plus were families.
So the graduates go on to, I guess, this is something most people have the concern about, have a stable job. I guess that's what most people are the ones that are wondering.
Yeah. What we really learned is that everything's okay. Your grown unschoolers are going to be okay out there in the world. They were gainfully employed or most were gainfully employed or obtaining higher education. Most went on to some sort of higher education. And again, a large majority were financially independent. So like the kids are
the vast majority that had this is majority, the vast majority that had this, stable job and stuff like that.
Yeah. Kids are going to be all right. You don't have to worry about that. Like I always tell parents, don't worry about outcomes. Your kids are going to be fine, But that's what that study really showed us. And I think that was we didn't expect it. We don't expect anything when we do studies. We just do them. But that was a real nice conclusion. Kids are going to be okay.
That's what I think that's really good. I think that's really good.
Also, we have to we have to do probably ready to do I think we should do our closing statements.
Mm.
If I'm talking, I'll just go first. So I think that what you were just saying about how like, your kids are going to be okay. That's what really the study showed us. That I think that even more plays into the fact that happiness is important in the first 17 years of your life also. I think that really plays into that. So, and I mean, you can't just discard happiness like that. It's not you can't just be like, oh, well, I mean, they need to learn. So who cares if they're happy with the first 17, 18, 19 years of their life? It's not acceptable. Especially, I think, if you were talking about how like the results study, you really thought that the overarching, message would be, your kids are going to be okay. They can find their way. That even shows even more like, happiness is important in being able to self-direct yourself. So yeah. But yeah, I guess that would be my closing statement.
I would like to say that I just really wanted to thank you for coming on, Gina.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was awesome.
Like our podcast has been off for a few weeks. It's nice to like get back into it with a really nice
Definitely.
episode. But yeah, you can say yours. I don't really have much to say.
Thank you guys so much. I loved continuing our conversation. Like I said, like these 2 hours went so fast. Best interviewers ever. I really appreciate your questions. I like love talking to you. Like it's been so awesome.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best. Yeah, I mean, again, like the main result is that the kids are going to be okay and parents don't worry. And, it's all about, for me, unschooling and homeschooling, it's all about seeing intrinsic motivation and self-determination in action. And I think that's like amazing in the learning environment. And seeing that in a learning environment is always just like so interesting and so awesome. I thank you guys for hosting this. This is a heck of a lot of work. And I think you're doing like amazing
It was awesome.
In the world. So thank you. I love
so you said that just really quick, you said you're coming out with a study on Sudbury schools. You said, should it be, because you're still working on that. So you said you might hear something about it maybe in the next year or so.
No, years, probably. So these studies so we are literally
still working on funding.
We are still working on funding. We want to be able to give the graduates that participate in the study a small stipend for participating because the questionnaires are going to be long. So we want to give them like $20 or so for participation. So we'd love to get some funding in order
to interview us. No.
Yeah, right. I mean, like if it wasn't like just Hudson Valley, I'm telling you, like that's why we want to give. Studies are, we're so thankful to our participants of our studies because they really give us like a part of their lives. So so you should hear about the results of the Hudson Valley Sudbury study.
Yeah, I will be
a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm totally open to having like when stuff like that happens again, having you on again, because always new stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'll have there's just an unschooling and reading, like exploring how unschoolers learn to read in the Journal of Alternative Education soon. So you'll be reading that soon.
Awesome. So you want to just tell really quick because we should probably end after I just ask this really quick question. How can people find your studies and how can people see these?
Sure. So you can do a Google search. You could also look up Gina Riley, Dr. Gina Riley, and academia.edu in Hunter College. All my studies are under academia.edu. I am on Facebook. I use it for like personal stuff, but whatever. And I'm Professor Gina Riley or Professor G Riley on Twitter. So again, don't do social media a lot for like professional stuff, but still have fun with it. So yeah, I mean, academia.edu is probably the best way to see all my writings in one place.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys.
Thank you everyone for watching. This has been awesome.
So fun.
Youth on Subjects of the World with Dr. Gina Riley. Thank you.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.